Good afternoon. Good to see everyone. Well, we'll just get started on this great after lunch session. So I'll just have each of our panelists introduce themselves by speaking about their role, the organization, as well as one practice that they have for increasing or enhancing their own productivity that also keeps in mind those words of sustainable and attainable. So let's start with you, Steve.
Sure. Steve Davis, I'm the National Sales Manager for Global Payments, which is a publicly traded Fortune 500 company headquartered in Atlanta. I've been in the fintech financial services industry for 28 years, so companies like American Express, FIS, and so excited to be on a panel here with such esteemed colleagues. I feel very little, but appreciate, you probably recognize I have an accent, so I'm not from Minnesota, I'm from Arkansas, but delighted to be here. I would say, as far as practices go and techniques, one of the things that I learned a little bit early in my career is, and you guys may have heard this, is called eat the frog. And so basically it's just taking the biggest task that is going to be in front of you that day and working and focusing and determined to get that through first. And so that's one of the things that I've always kind of subscribed to, is making sure that I attack those things first. And then after I complete those, those certain larger tasks, just taking a little bit of break and giving myself some time to attack the next task. But that's one of the things that I do.
Eat the frog first, I like it. All right, Dustin, let's hear from you.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's always hard to follow when someone refers to you as an esteemed panelist, but I'm Dustin Wellick. I lead 3M's HR Strategy and Solutions organization. So that includes our enterprise listening and assessment, HR technology and reporting. We have an HR solutions team. If you've been following some of the trends in HR, there's like this agile problem solver pool kind of technique. So it's a pool of kind of global generalists that can be deployed across our business groups on kind of project-based assignments. And then our strategy and transformation organization. And I don't know if this is so much advice as it is learning that I've had, but I've been a people leader for quite some time. I would say, given the breadth of my role though, I learned quickly that the more I try to do, the less gets done. And so I continue to challenge myself and my leaders on my team to delegate. And so that's something that's much easier said than done, at least for me, but that's certainly one aspect that has allowed me to be most productive.
Thanks, Dustin. All right, Jody, let's hear from you.
Hi, I'm Jody. I'm at Wells Fargo. And Steve, welcome to Minnesota. And I will say, we look forward to your permanent residency here, because when people come here,
I am a Vikings fan, so skull.
Excellent. I work in our talent attraction team, so a lot of branding and recruitment marketing, and I lead strategic initiatives there. And I would say, as far as productivity, I'm a solid Xer, so lists, paper and pen is a real solid methodology for me. And then I have found blocking my calendar and managing my calendar. So to your point, I try to get out as many meetings as I can. Like, do I really need to be there? No. But literally the day before, look at my calendar and say, these are the things I need to accomplish. I call them my VIPs, my very important tasks that I need to get done. And I block my calendar so that when that time comes up, I'm very intentional. I close out one thing and I can begin the next thing very planfully.
Great, thank you.
All right, good afternoon. My name is Kelly Johnson. I'm with US Bank, and I lead our HR advisory services team for our branches, consumer lending, and wealth employees. So that's about 20,000 of our 70,000 employees. And what is advisory services? It's a little bit of a unique title. So my team's responsible for all advising of employee issues, policies, investigations, employee relations types issues. Those all come to a centralized team. We manage those with the leaders at US Bank, and we help to resolve those. One thing for me, calendar management is one that I try to live by as well, and really calendaring things that are not my strength. So strategizing for me is not my strongest thing, so I have to put in holds to strategize, shut everything down and do that. So I think that's one. And the second thing is something I too learned early in my career is the 4 Ds of email. So I try to touch my emails just one time, and I either do it, delegate it, defer it, or delete it. And my email really just becomes my to-do list, and I just have that as kind of my running to-do list, and it doesn't overwhelm me.
Great, those are some awesome techniques. So let's just set the stage a little bit. So do you think that companies today are expecting more from their workers? And if that's the case, what are the best ways to manage those expectations, taking into account what's reasonable for the worker, as well as the need to meet business goals? Let's start with Kelly on that.
Sure. So I absolutely think we are expecting more of employees, but I think we're doing so because we are becoming more efficient in the ways that we work. And certainly, I don't know how many were able to be in that breakout A. It was pretty full in there. But certainly, technological advancements have allowed us to become far more efficient in the way we work. And in doing that, we are able to find time for employees to do more different tasks, I would say. And I think about it from our banking standpoint. So we have tellers in branches, and I think all of you know, in the old kind of model of a teller, you would go in, they would deposit a check, they would cash your check, and that would be their role. Well, certainly with the advancements of technology, you can do that at home, you can do that quickly at an ATM. So their role has certainly evolved into something that it once wasn't, and now we expect them to engage with clients in a different way. If it's quiet, we're asking them to do outreach. They rotate to different parts of the branch. And we changed their title to really help signal that change. I think that's one way that we showed that, and they are now called a client relationship consultant. And that kind of signaled the change in the role and the expectations. But communication is really key. The why behind why the job is changing, what we're expecting of them. I think that's one of the main things that you can help to kind of navigate that change.
Thank you. Jody, anything to add?
I would say there is a sense of inevitability when people are dealing with this concept of doing more with less. And I think, I'm sure many of you have looked at this with reorganizations, people are being asked to do more. We do have technology there. But I also think there's a real thirst and interest to learn more, because as people are looking at their career paths, they used to be really singular in a sense, and now I think people are seeing multi-careers. I've heard I have multiple careers across the course of my life, and I think we're seeing that particularly with Gen Z. So I think if companies can reposition the do more with less as we are opening up new avenues of opportunity to build new skills, to think about things differently, we can drive some of the narrative, because sometimes whoever is driving those changes, the tone in which you drive them, I think is important in affecting the outcomes of that. So every organization I think is doing it. I think some organizations are doing it better with how they're selling it.
Great, thanks. So if we think about this potential for expecting more, and we talked about why or what has changed, can employers actually learn from workers, right? So what type of listening strategies do you employ at your organization to understand kind of what workers need in terms of resources or processes or other supports? We start with you, Devin.
Dustin,
excuse me.
No problem. So you could ask them, and you probably should. I think sometimes we try to make things more complicated than we need to. I mean, ask them what they need, ask them what they're confused about, ask them if they're clear on the KPIs, what type of resources or skills or experiences that they need. At 3M, we do have an active listening strategy. We also have what we call an ambient listening strategy. So we kind of scrape all of the questions and comments that come through the town halls, our Viva Engage or Slack channels, and we consolidate them for themes, and you can get a lot of information from that. What questions are people asking? You can also start to understand tone. So if people are just generally confused, right? I mean, that means we're not being clear about what is expected of them. If you start to get hints of anxiety, that could be, they don't feel like they're equipped or capable to perform what we need them to do or at the volume we need them to do it. If they're resistant, perhaps we're not quite hitting the what's in it for them or incentivizing them to lean in. So those are some of the ways I would encourage everyone to approach it, but I would start by just asking the question. Sorry to be overly simplistic, but
No, that's important to state that. Kelly, have you written down as someone who might want to add more to that?
Sure. Yeah. So I think in addition to the listening surveys, which we do as well, it's the culture that's created, and that culture of fostering those innovative ideas and allowing the team to feel comfortable to bring those forward. And so it's really how are you creating that culture. We just wrapped up last week at US Bank something that we call Innovation Week. And that's a week where our teams come and share new innovations. It's where we celebrate innovations that have been created from the previous year. And it's around big changes, but it's also around changes in processes and ways we can do work differently. And so just having that culture and a strategy around that, I think really allows the team to feel comfortable to bring those ideas forward and to create that space for change.
Great, thanks. So we've talked about productivity, but there's also, again, the employee side in terms of the wellness, the state of mind. Surveys of employees have shown that there's kind of increasing anxiety about different aspects, whether it's financial security, whether it's about caregiving roles or other personal needs. What are you hearing about the connection between that productivity space and then the wellness and state of mind space? Let's hear from you, Steve.
Sure. So there definitely is a link between employee wellness, and state of mind in regards to employee productivity. And kind of in the realm that I work within, we see a lot of issues, not issues per se, but stressors around anxiety related to financial concerns and personal issues and things like that. And so there are a lot of data and a lot of studies that are out there in regards to that. I think 1 in 3 people that we've seen surveys on have displayed, money worries. And money worries obviously affect your work, your productivity at work. And so it's a big issue. We talk a lot about mental health, and mental health is a big deal. But part of the convergence of that, and to me, there's a correlation between financial wellness and mental health. And so I think the two of those are tied together. Really, to thrive at work, an employee's basic needs need to be met. And in our culture today with our payroll systems, they're not designed a lot. The payroll doesn't line up with bill due dates. And so with that being said, there's a lot of stress that goes into week to week. I mean, 60% of the population is living paycheck to paycheck. And so when you think about that, there is a big correlation between, the financial stress that goes on and what happens at work from a productivity standpoint. I just think about early in my career, as I said before, there were times where finances were difficult. And I think in all of us here that are in this stage or in this auditorium probably have had financial situations where they've been stressed. And it's been a big topic of conversation in your family, at work, or whatever. And so to me, those are things that need to be addressed. And the good thing about that is there are some great financial wellness tools available that can help with worker productivity. And that's the good thing about it.
Yeah, thank you. Jody, anything more to add on that?
The only additional thing I would add is, one of the things I think we as HR need to really think about when we think about, well-being and how our employees are, that I think we have a lot of really different demographics in the office. And again, as I said, I'm an Xer, and so there's a lot of stereotypes about that. But Gen Z, to me, is I've recently went and saw a speaker talking about Gen Z and how we as leaders can connect with them. And it was really, really different than I remember going through of other generations, even the millennials, et cetera. And so I think that in addition to listening through surveys, et cetera, but also recognizing how people are working is really, really different. And, we can talk till we're blue in the face about stereotypes and entitlements and, oh, nobody wants to work, or what is this return to office, and there's all this drama. But I think at the end of the day, we just have to realize that everyone has a different learning style, and I think we as HR leaders need to lean into that even more, and we need to have our leaders lean into that more to talk about employee wellness, because everyone's a contributor, and it's our job to kind of make sure we're drawing out their productivity at their highest.
Yeah, thank you. Kind of related to that, let's say you have an employee who's maybe struggling, perhaps because of these financial issues or personal reasons or other reasons that manifests in underperformance, right? So what are some fresh approaches that you've seen or that your organization has adopted or is thinking about adopting that can help support those employees and kind of turn them around? Looks like maybe Kelly wants to jump in first.
Sure, I can start. So certainly, my team being our advisory services, we handle a lot around the performance management process. And certainly when we have a manager who reaches out to us and wants to engage around employee performance issues, the conversation for the most part starts with, let's talk about what's going on outside of work. Is there something that you know that might be impacting the employee inside of work? And we try to start there because sometimes what we find is managers either don't want to go down that path or really don't know how to engage in a conversation to go down that path. And so really trying to help educate them around, is there something that has changed in their behavior that we should go back and talk through with the employee? And not all the time, but we will find sometimes we will hear, oh yes, there's financial issues going on, or there's a personal issue going on at home, or they recently found out a parent has some sort of illness and they're now taking the role of a caretaker. And so we'll try to make sure that the manager feels equipped to offer all of the benefits that we have to offer in those situations and talk through an appropriate plan. And in some cases, we see performance turn around and we can approach it that way. Certainly, there's other times where we don't, and we'll go through that process. But it's that education with our leaders of really knowing how to start that conversation and how to engage in that dialogue.
Great, thank you. Dustin, jump in?
I might take just one step before you get to that point, because I think the answer to the question of do we expect more out of our employees is yes, we do. I think the organization needs to hold a mirror up in front of itself to say we need to work differently if we want to do more with less. That means changing processes, it means changing skills, it means changing structure to make sure that we are working efficiently across the organization. And I think we sometimes forget about that and we just jump to what does the employee need, or they're not getting it, or right. And it's like, well, have we made a good faith effort first to kind of support that? And the HR solutions team is one quick example where it's, we had dedicated HR business partner alignment at basically all levels of our company. You had some that were dying on the vine because of the restructuring their group was going to. You had others who weren't. We were not able to act in an agile manner in that case. We now have a different structure that allows us to deploy in more of a ad hoc basis, which helps with that agility. I also think change management is something that most organizations are patient enough to do very well. But at some point, after you can look at yourself in the mirror and say, we've exhausted all of those things, yes, change management turns into performance management. And then it just becomes a conversation about really clearly outlining what is working and what's not working and supporting the employee to either improve or not.
Yeah, thank you. So you heard a little about this from Jody already, but it's graduation around here. So May is commencement month here at the U. And so we have another crop of Gen Zs entering the workforce. That's been reported, and like you mentioned, that maybe there's some differences compared to other generations. So what techniques have you been using to recruit or attract and retain these types of workers to kind of both attract them, but also manage expectations and be realistic about their upcoming career journey?
Yeah. I think right now, obviously social media reach is key in there. And if y'all haven't figured out how to reach your candidate base through social media, that has to be a high priority. I think that we're moving out of the era when you do that outreach of the very high gloss, high production, everything looks like a rainbow, and there's unicorns and fairy dust everywhere, and they step into day one, and then all of a sudden day 5, they're like, I haven't seen a unicorn since I've been here, where do you keep them? Right? I think that, so like the, one piece of an example, a day in the life of video, they're very, very big right now, of, you know, not just showing the highlights of this perfectly gliding day of somebody through there where everything sparkles on there, but really talking to your employees who are sharing their day in the life of like giving a very realistic picture of what that looks like. I think Instagram, you know, Gen X millennials were all kind of Instagram, everything was very filtered and pretty. But Gen Z is very TikTok, and well, everything's kind of filtered there, but it's a little bit more raw, which is what is connecting with Gen Z. So think about that as you approach that next talent base and how you want to do something.
Yeah, that's good. Kelly, anything to add on?
I think just, you know, certainly we do a lot of that at US Bank. You know, we had a session this morning around the employee value proposition, and we have a leader who manages that for us on our recruiting team as well. And so I think it's really kind of pulling out from that employee value proposition what means most to the candidate in front of you, whether that's a Gen X or a Gen Zer, and really helping them to understand who we are as an organization, what our employee value proposition is, and really trying to feel if there's a connection between the two, because if there's not, it's not going to be a good fit for either one. And so really making sure that our recruiters and leaders are set up with that in order to share that through the candidate experience.
Great. And we have time if anyone else, Steve or Dustin, want to add on to those great insights. Okay, so we're going to switch to everyone's favorite topic of artificial intelligence and generative AI. So I'm curious, we're all curious about what areas are either you or your organization kind of leaning into more quickly in that space. What are you kind of being a little bit more hesitant on? That'd be kind of just great to hear kind of status quo, what's going on in your organization. So Dustin, let's start with you.
Yeah, so I would say probably not surprising given I have the technology kind of responsibility. I've been doing a lot of benchmarking with organizations, and I can't cite who said this because it just escapes my mind, but somebody said, if you give a fool a tool, they're still a fool. And I'm not suggesting we have a whole bunch of fools running around 3M or anywhere else, just like let's not have that be the takeaway here. I do think though, like as a society, we're putting a lot of eggs in the AI will fix it basket, and it is a tool and we have to figure out the best way to leverage it. I think we also have to acknowledge that there are a whole bunch of things that haven't caught up with AI, including like the legal landscape and legislation that continues to come out. So I will be the first to say 3M is kind of taking the approach of we will be an early adopter, at least from an HR perspective. We will happily walk down a trail that somebody else has blazed and help knock the trees over and get rid of the poison ivy and all of that. There are a couple things though that we're leaning into. So the other thing I'll mention in these benchmarking conversations that I'm having is there's a lot of top down. There's a lot of like, we will use AI for this coming from senior leadership. We're taking a different approach, which is a groundswell of what do you think would be most effective to leverage AI on. And within HR, one of the things was career planning, career development. And so we are deploying a talent marketplace, which will allow us to have employees say, here are the skills that I have, here are the experiences that I have. That'll be really valuable for us as we look at succession and pipelining and talent planning. It will also give them line of sight to, I want to get there, what are my gaps? And we can offer up curated content to get there. We can also connect people together who maybe, I have a skill, they want a skill, why don't you two meet and kind of start a mentoring relationship? So I think that's one area that we are going to lean maybe a bit more early into in terms of AI, and we'll continue to see what our workforce comes up with as we move forward.
Yeah, great. Kelly, you have anything to add to that?
Sure. I think it's right. AI is a very hot topic, and everybody has an opinion on what should be done with AI. And so, I think we're still thinking through what does that look like, although there's parts of the bank that definitely have adopted some new tools and technology with AI. One thing that our company did though, and because we're a financial services industry, we are governed by a lot of risk and compliance. And so that can make things take a little bit longer. But we have an overarching AI strategy for the organization. And I think that's what helps us is when somebody comes forward with a new idea to really stop and say, is this in line with our overall strategy? If not, maybe it's not the right time to do something. But that really kind of helps to, I think, give the overlying view of what we are comfortable taking a chance on from a risk and compliance standpoint. But we do see areas where we definitely have done different elements of AI. And I think about our HR service center, which is, questions on pay and benefits and different things, provided that there's not, specific people data, because that's where we start to get into a little bit of risk. But general questions we can see where we have a chatbot that can solve those questions and take out the need to talk to somebody live. And that has been very beneficial. And so we start to think about, can we use that elsewhere? But again, when we get into the people side of things, people data, that's where it gets a little bit more sensitive. So
Great. Yeah, is there anyone to add on to that hot question?
Yeah, I would say one of the things that I think is really important, whether or not your company has a formal AI strategy, is make sure you're talking about it. Communication is key, and people are really scared. Every headline, I don't know if any of you saw Moderna announced this morning that their technology and HR departments are combining, right? And I think that sends to people, like, we're all HR practitioners, so maybe we can understand some of that connective tissue that's there. But to somebody that doesn't have that insight, it sounds really scary, right? And I think whatever your strategy is, communicating it as much as you can, even if it's, hey, we don't know yet how this is going to impact us, but let's have questions, let's be open to that. Just because, even as a recruiter, I read the headlines, and if you talk to 3 different people in the world, like, they're going to tell me robots are already doing my job. And I'm like, no, I'm pretty sure I still show up every day and have something to do. So, but I think that's the fear, and people have that fear.
I think that's right.
I agree. I'm a little fearful myself for IT and HR to come together as one organization for a variety of reasons, but that's a different panel that we'll deal with at a different time.
Yeah, we could spend all afternoon on that. Okay, let's circle back to more like an employee benefit space, which maybe is a precursor for later sessions. But what trends are you seeing in terms of organizations potentially personalizing the types of rewards or benefits or practices that they're using to attract and retain their workers, especially when it comes to thinking about their whole lives and kind of work as being part of that? So we haven't heard from Steve for a while, so let's start with you.
Sure. So I'll address it again from a financial perspective. And I think Kelly had mentioned this earlier. Cultivating an empowered and engaged culture is very important. And I think that's an important aspect or step to really alleviating financial issues as well. And show of hands, how many of you guys are aware or have some sort of understanding of the term on-demand pay or earned wage access? Pretty good number of you guys. So for those that do not, earned wage access is basically a financial wellness benefit that allows the employee to access a portion of their accrued wages prior to payroll. And for the most part, it is free to the employer. From our perspective, it is. There are companies out there that do charge for that, but and it's a great financial wellness tool to enable that employee to access a portion of those wages in a timely manner. Because as I mentioned before, bills don't always line up with payroll, so it gives them a sense of empowerment, right? Because they now have the power to access a portion of those wages and utilize those wages in a way that puts them in a better financial situation. And they're not coming to work stressed out. They're not coming to work thinking about, how am I going to pay the babysitter that I had to hire? How am I going to pay for that pop tire on the way to work? Those emergency situations that pop up on us frequently from time, some of us frequently, but some of us from time to time, and we're not prepared for those. I read a study the other day that I think it said 60%, was it 60% of the population, I think I said this before, is living paycheck to paycheck. And so when we think about that, it's important to identify those situations and create an environment or a culture where your employees can access those type of things and be empowered by those types of things. And so I would just say that for your organizations, it's probably something you probably need to look at. It may not work in every organization, but it's kind of the first step to look at in ways that you can create a financial wellness benefit to your employees that don't have that access, and create a better culture from that perspective.
Great, thank you. Any other panelists want to add in terms of the employee benefit space that you're seeing?
I can share a little bit more. So, I think similar, we are offering a lot more around the financial wellness aspect of it and trying to kind of approach it from, again, meeting the employee where they're at, whether it's Gen Z or somebody who's on, the path to retirement, and really making sure we've got benefit offerings that do support them, whether it's I need to repay a college loan to I am getting ready to retire and I need to know what that looks like, and really making sure we meet employees where they're at. We do really look at our employee survey comments as well to help kind of guide some of what that is, as well as our benefits usage, and really understand that data. And I think about, just 8 years ago when I had my last baby and what was offered from a maternity benefit standpoint to what we offer today, and how we recognize that, families form in many different ways, and our benefits have evolved, certainly to accommodate for adoption and surrogacy and the many ways that families are created. And so I think that's just one way that we really look at kind of the whole person and understand who they are.
Great, thank you. So we've touched on kind of personal financial instability, but there's also a lot of change happening kind of nationally and internationally in terms of economic and political changes that could be a distraction, undermine your workers' ability to focus. So what can employers do to kind of help workers stay on track and be able to be productive at work? So I guess we'll hear from Jody first on this.
Yeah, I mean, is something going on in the world? I don't know. I think the key is not hiding from things. I mean, your team members aren't oblivious. They also are aware of what's going on. I mean, with the academy. So again, open transparency, having those conversations, but also, HR should do what HR does best and make sure that, you're not putting kindling on a fire to create a volatile experience in the workplace. I think kind of focusing on how it's impacting your organization and kind of keeping it limited, putting a little bit of some guardrails there on how the conversation has it. I think something that, we're obviously seeing some pretty dramatic changes in the spaces of DEI, right? And some of this is unsettling to a lot of our employees because companies or corporations are making different decisions. I can say honestly, at Wells, one of the things I think we have done really well is that we've had our leaders be very vocal with conversations about what this happens, recommitment to inclusion, and everyone kind of acknowledges maybe the vocabulary has changed a little bit, but at the end of the day, hopefully your practices and your values are solid enough in a foundation that vocabulary, while words matter and they're very, very important, but hopefully it's so threaded through your culture that it's not going to shake. It might wobble in these times, but I think having those open conversations, but again, we as HR leaders need to have those conversations with our frontline leaders, because sometimes they don't know what to say or they don't know how to approach a topic. And so it could be as simple as putting together some talking points and sending it out and kind of doing that waterfall cascade of communication and making sure their questions are answered. Because chances are, if they have questions, when their employees ask them questions, you don't want to leave them feeling like they've been kind of left out to flap in the wind.
Dustin, anything to add?
It is a tough one, isn't it? I think there's a couple things that come to mind. I don't chase the chaos. The chaos will come. You don't need to go track it down, right? And if you do feel like you have to, not everyone needs to go on that roller coaster with you. So there's a balance between transparency and buckling everyone in for it. And I think each company is going to have to find the right balance there. I would say there is so much, the pace, the volume of change and chaos out there is overwhelming that sometimes we forget about like what's not changing. I think starting there and making sure that employees know what's not changing, whether it's values, whether it's business objectives, whether it's what, our business performance goals, can be a really important and strong foundation to start with and just like get the kind of ground under everyone's feet. And then, yes, from there, figure out like, what are the no regret decisions as a company we're going to make, regardless of what happens. We know these are the right things to do for our company. We're going to stand behind them no matter what. And then, yes, you've got to put on the firefighting apparatus and you go fight some fires for sure. HR is good at that. And so that's the good news. But I do think don't underestimate the importance of starting with like, hey, here's what hasn't changed. Because I think that we forget to do that with all the distractions happening.
Yeah, well, that's great.
I have one other thing to add. So another thing that we do at U.S. Bank, so those are, political, economic, right? Those are big changes that impact individuals, but some of the smaller changes or one-off changes also can impact individuals just as much. And one thing that we offer is what we call support circles, and those are for things that employees themselves just want to connect on. So a new mom returning to the workplace, or a parent who's going to become an empty nester, or somebody who's dealing with aging parents. It's circles that it's employee-led, but it's a chance for employees to connect on something that is meaningful for them. And I think sometimes those connections with others that you may not work with day to day, or that may not, or your coworkers aren't going through those same things, those connections can be very impactful for employees to find kind of a safe space to talk through that, get ideas, to be able to be more successful as well.
Yeah, going to make it more at the local level. That's good. Well, we are at the end of our panel in terms of we're going to have each of the panelists leave you with one action that you can take in your workplace to help create a more productive work environment that also keeps in mind the angles of sustainability and attainability. So we'll start with Steve.
Sure. So I would just, continuing on with the financial perspective, is trying to provide some sort of unique employee wellness benefits. That can come in different forms, right? And we've all talked about how that can look, and it's going to look different in everybody's organization. So some way creating those unique employee benefits. And I would say that just small incremental steps in that, from that perspective, will go a long way in kind of building your culture and building better worker productivity as well.
If it's okay, I'd like to double down on one of the other things that I said before, which is please challenge your clients and your leaders on what their responsibility is. If we expect from our employees to do more with less, my assumption is I've never heard like, oh, okay, we're going to just roll down our sales projections then. I've never heard that. What does that mean then? How are you going to lead differently? What are you going to do to adapt the organization? How are you going to invest in either new tools, skills, or capabilities? That is not the employee's job. It's not HR's job either, by the way. It is the business leadership's job to figure out how they should equip their organization for what they'd like them to do.
My advice is connecting the dots to make sure there's a succinct message within your organizations, because we are asking people to do more with less. I think part of that is helping to orchestrate the narrative of what that is. That's HR. That is something that we do really, really well. Making sure that everyone is connected, that connective tissue is built out in there, and some of that's through transparency, some of that's about how we message things in there. I also think to some degree, when we talk about the accountability on there, making sure that people understand how they fit into the picture now and what are the opportunities available to them. So again, I'm also going to double down earlier is like how we message something. I'm not saying to blow smoke up anyone's skirt in that sense, because that doesn't do anything. People have that sense, but tailoring your message and also letting people know, this is the recruiter in me, letting people know what the opportunity to develop something new means to them and where they can take that. I think taking a much more optimistic perspective on things or positive spin on things can be contagious, as well as if you just focus on chaos and destructive messages.
So on the positive perspective, we'll have Kelly close us out.
I think I talked about this earlier, but I think it's really the culture that's created around thinking about things differently. And when, tasks get handed down, giving the space for employees who are doing the day-to-day work and probably have some of the best ideas to bring those ideas forward. I was having a one-on-one with an employee just a few months ago, and we were talking through something, and I said, what would you do differently? And she goes, oh, I've never really been asked that before. Can I give a suggestion? I was like, absolutely, and I want your team to give suggestions as well, because this is how we get better, this is how we get more efficient. And so really creating that culture and that openness to look at things differently.
Great. Well, please join me in thanking the panelists.